Her story is a truly remarkable one. A woman who parachuted into occupied France and took charge of 7,000 French resistance fighters. The Gestapo would codename her the White Mouse because of her amazing ability to evade capture. But these days you'll find Nancy Wake, this great New Zealand heroine, living alone and financially stretched in a small apartment in the Australian seaside town of Port Macquarie. But although she'll turn 89 next month, you'll discover this is a mouse who can still roar.
I hated the Germans. I hated them. I loathed and detested them. And as far as I was concerned, the only good one was the dead one, and the deader the better.
She may look like anyone's granny, but in a day, Nancy Wake was a cold, hard killer, the most decorated Allied woman in World War II. A forgotten New Zealander parachuted into occupied France to fight with the resistance. A freedom fighter high on the Gestapo's hit list, who faced death daily.
That was always the risk, wasn't it?
You've got to remember this, young man, that I had a responsible job. And do you think that I was going to show any signs of fear in front of 7,000 resistance Marquis? Would they have listened to me? They had to take orders from me. I have to. It's as simple as that.
She'll be 90 next year, but Nancy still shows the spirit that in France at least sees her regarded as a legend delivered in the Wellington suburb of Roseneath in 1912 by a Māori midwife.
Apparently, she took me in her arms and she said to my mother, "This little girl will always be lucky. She has been born with a cowl on her face." So, could this be true?
But Nancy's early years were less lucky. Her journalist father moved the family to Sydney, where he soon deserted them, leaving Nancy's care in the hands of an impoverished mother.
Your mother was very religious.
Well, she was a pain in the neck.
Nancy's first big break came when she was 18, courtesy of a New Zealand aunt who sent her £200 to follow her dream of travelling the world.
It must have taken immense courage at 18 to take on the world.
Well, Mr. Doubting Thomas, I achieved it.
You did indeed.
I had £200 too. I'd never had £200 before. I was rich.
Nancy was soon half a world away. She'd revel in the speakeasies of Prohibition New York before going on to London to train as a journalist. An assignment to Vienna to report on the rise of the Nazi movement changed her life forever.
We went to this big square in the middle of Vienna, and to my horror, there was this great big wheel, a big wheel going round and round, and on each rung a Jew tied, going round and round like that. And the stormtrooper was whipping, whipping, whipping. I made up my mind. I said, well, I don't know what I do, but if I can do anything, I will do it, because I thought that was the most dreadful thing to see.
Based in Paris, Nancy won the heart of a wealthy French industrialist, and Henri Fiocco became her first husband. The couple enjoyed a charmed and sophisticated champagne lifestyle. But 6 months after they married, Germany invaded France. Nancy joined the embryonic resistance movement, her marriage providing perfect cover for her work in the French underground network. She'd be credited with helping over 2,000 Jews and shot down Allied airmen, including New Zealanders, escape over the next 2.5 years. But eventually, her cover was blown.
I went up to Henri and I told him, he said, well, you've got to go. So I had to leave. I left that night.
The Gestapo had codenamed her the White Mouse for her ability to evade capture. But now her identity was known, Nancy faced an almost impossible task, getting out of occupied France.
I mean, you even had to jump out of a moving train.
Nothing ventured, nothing won.
It's
no good-looking surprise. I mean, it all happened.
Oh, I know it happened. must have taken extraordinary courage.
Oh, well, wouldn't you hop it if you thought the Krauts were after you? I hopped. Couldn't go fast enough.
Hopped and walked, trekked and climbed 52 hours over the highest peaks of the Pyrenees into Spain.
Most people would have been frightened witless being chased by the Gestapo. Were you ever scared?
I don't think I've ever been scared. Cautious, but not scared. Cautious, not scared, though.
She had escaped against the odds with her life, but having been evacuated back to Britain, Nancy was willing to risk it all again. She'd joined the Special Operations Executive and, like these operatives, trained to become an agent and saboteur behind enemy lines. On the stroke of midnight, April 29, 1944, she'd parachute back into France, landing in a tree.
And along comes this gorgeous-looking Frenchman, and he looks up at me and he said that England could send us such a beautiful flower. I said, cut out that French shit and get me out of this tree, and he's never forgotten it.
Nancy was in charge of supplying and training 7,000 men in the French resistance, the Marquis, and at the forefront of attacks on Nazi targets. She'd witnessed some of the worst atrocities of war, but Nancy herself ordered the death of a German woman who had infiltrated the Marquis.
I said, well, I'm sorry, you'll have to be shot. I'm sorry about that. And she didn't care. But the men refused to shoot her. We can't. I said, well, if you don't shoot her, I will.
Do you ever reflect on times like that, ordering somebody's death?
Well, but look what she done there. She was bloody lucky. Christ. I wouldn't have had a good death.
But here you were, with a cyanide pill stitched into your sleeve, knowing that at any time you could be captured, tortured brutally, any day, any hour of any day. That must have been in your mind.
This interview's getting a bit morbid. Let's have a little bit of fruit. Where's my gin and tonic? Cheers.
Yeah, cheers to you.
Yeah. Here's to it, and to it, and to it again. And if you don't do it the first time you get to it, may you never get to it again.